Are you getting a ton of drop stitches or a ton of tuck stitches using your Sentro circular knitting machine? I thought this would be a really good video to discuss this because I was using this beautiful Premier number 4 worsted weight yarn, and this was one of the Premier yarns I hadn't used before, so I was testing it out on my machine. And even though it said it was a number 4 worsted, it was a very dense and a thick yarn where it's almost on the verge of a number 5, and honestly it ended up being too thick for my machine. And so I'm going to show you what happens, an indicator where the yarn is too thick. You're going to hear this popping or grinding noise as we start to go, so listen to this and see what it sounds like. Hear that? That's the popping or grinding noise. And so I wasn't quite sure what was going on, if it was the yarn or just my machine. You'll notice I always use my left hand for tension. I don't rely on the tension bar. And I tried it again. I gave a little more tension and see, I still get that popping or grinding noise. So I tried multiple different types of tension with this. I also tried I got out my claw weights and I put my claw weights on to see if that would help weight down the fabric, and it was still giving me that popping and grinding noise. And then by about row 50, I started getting a ton of tuck stitches and a few drop stitches. And so all those things put together, this yarn is really too thick for this machine. But I thought this would make a really good video to show the difference between a tuck stitch and a drop stitch, and also how to fix them. So here's my row 50, here's my drop stitch. A drop stitch is when if you pull on it, you're just gonna start getting these ladders and it's going to unravel. And then you can see I have a ton of tuck stitches. There's like this big horizontal bar that's bumped out of the fabric. And if we were to remove it and look at the knit side of our machine, of our fabric, you'll have two big holes. So it just doesn't look nice with the tuck stitch. They don't unravel, but they just don't make a consistent stitch. So I'm going to show you a close-up of these as well so you can see the difference between the two. So close up, here is that tuck stitch again. You get that horizontal bar bump on the purl side of your fabric. And again, if you looked at the knit side, you would see two big holes. I'll kind of pull back this bar and you can kind of see where those two holes would start because it hasn't made a consistent knit stitch in the machine. So there's that, and then a drop stitch is if you pull on it, you're just going to get these ladders, and that loop's going to unravel all the way down if we don't fix it. So fixing both a tuck stitch and a drop stitch, you can do the same thing. You want to crank your machine around until wherever that drop stitch is or that tuck stitch is. There's one right there. I have a tuck stitch. We're going to crank it around, and when we get to the yarn holder, we first want to wrap the yarn around the needle so no more yarn gets picked up where we want to fix this tuck stitch. So now no yarn's there, but then you want to make sure all the other needles still pick up the yarn from the yarn holder, or else they're going to start dropping rows. So you got to be careful. So you want to make sure you remember which row you want to fix, or which needle. And so it's this one right here. And now when it gets back around, it's still on the left side of my yarn holder. We're going to fix this knit stitch. So usually I like to use my loom pick and my crochet hook to do this. I could not find my loop pick to save my life today. So I found this, and we're going to use this to take it off the two small pegs. Now, if you look at this one, if I just try to remove the loop, there's still a piece of yarn tucked up under that needle. So that's why we have to put the needle around, and so it doesn't pick it up, and crank around one more time. Because see how this one next to it, it still has that loop trapped underneath the needle, whereas this is the one where I skipped the one needle that had the tuck stitch. If I pulled this loop up now, which is why a loom pick is really handy, now we don't have any more yarn tucked underneath the machine. So that's why we always crank it around one more time and skipping the one needle that we want to fix. So that's just a nice visual to show you. So there's where our tuck stitch is. And then I usually do a few more bars down below the tuck stitch, and then I pull up the loop. And then we're going to stick our crochet hook underneath the horizontal ladders or bar. And then we're going to put the loop on our hook, put a bar over the loop, put the loop over the bar, and now we're making the same stockinette knit stitch that the machine makes. And so you're going to do this row by row until all we have left is a loop on our crochet hook, and then we're going to add that loop back onto our machine. And it will get kind of tight when we get back up to the top. So that's why where a loom pick also really helps. You can get them for like $4 or $5 on Amazon. Probably Michael's might have one if they have looms. So loom pick's really nice. I've just misplaced mine right now, so I just have to use my fingers for this last one. So just take your time at this point because you don't want any loops to drop off any of the other needles. And so the biggest thing is just be patient and take your time. Once I have that last bar over, now I just have a loop left on my hook. You want to take your loom pick or a knitting needle, whatever you got, and place it back over those two small pegs. Now when you go to start to crank forward, see what happened? The loop popped off the needle because the needle comes up and it pops it over. So you don't want to do that. That's my example of what not to do, because then you're going to get a drop stitch and you're going to have to refix the whole thing. So what works out better is before you start cranking out, you're going to take your loom pick or your knitting needle or whatever you have. You want to hold down that loop onto those two pegs so that needle can come up through the two pegs without popping off that loop. So now the one next to it that I popped off the loop so you could see how there's a piece of yarn still stuck underneath it, we're going to need to fix him as well. And so again, we're going to want to do the same thing. So I'll zoom out a little bit. Once it gets to the yarn holder, we're going to stop. And then we want to move the yarn around the needle so it doesn't hook onto it. And it's just on the one needle on the row you're wanting to fix. And then make sure that yarn is seated all the way down into that yarn tensioner so all the following needles can still grab and hook onto that yarn and pull it down into the machine. That's very key. If those following needles can't grab that yarn, you're going to then get a ton of drop stitches. And then by that point, you pretty much just want to take the whole fabric off the machine, frog it, and redo. So once you crank around one more time and we get back to the needle that we're going to fix, that we removed the yarn from, we do it on the left side of the machine right before it gets back to our yarn holder. So I take the loop off of the two pegs, and now there's no yarn stuck underneath the needle in the machine. So now we're able to fix this really easy, just like we did on our tuck stitch. So we put the crochet hook under, put the loop on the crochet hook, the bar over the loop, and then the loop over the bar. The bar becomes our new loop on our crochet hook. And you just want to make sure each horizontal bar that you're doing this, you do it in order so you don't get a weird twist in your knit stitch as well. If you don't have a loom pick, another thing that works really good is an opened paper clip on the end of it. I couldn't find a paper clip either, but I've been able to use those in a pinch as well, or when I didn't have a loom pick. A paper clip worked very nice to help you kind of get this last loop up and over your crochet hook when it gets really tight here, and then back on those two small pegs. The other thing you want to make sure you do is once you get that loop back onto your crochet hook, the last loop, and then you're going to put it onto those two small pegs, is you want to make sure the fabric is also under the large pegs of our machine as well. And now we want to hold down that loop so that loop cannot come up as we start to crank forward. And we want to make sure the needle comes up through the two pegs and the loop is still down onto the small pegs below the machine. And then continue to crank forward to make sure every needle catches the yarn and pulls that down in between the two small pegs. Next, we're going to show how I fix a drop stitch. It's the same technique as the tuck stitch. So again, here coming up is going to be my tuck stitch. It's right over here. So there's my drop stitch. So what we want to do is, again, make sure no yarn is tucked underneath inside the machine before we fix it. So I move the yarn around the needle so it doesn't grab it. Again, make sure all the following needles continue to grab the yarn so that yarn is all the way where that looks like a little tongue sticking out. It's completely in the front of that machine, of that yarn holder, all the way through the back. Now we've cranked around one time, it's almost back to my yarn holder. Now we're going to fix the drop stitch the same exact way as the tuck stitch. Remove the loop from the two small pegs, and there's no yarn now tucked under the needle. And then we're going to take our crochet hook and do the same thing. We're going to pick up the loop with our crochet hook, and you'll see how my crochet hook is under the horizontal bars. And I'm using the crochet hook that came with the machine. Pick up the loop on your crochet hook. Now take each bar over the loop and put the loop over the bar, and the bar becomes your new loop. And this is making that knit stitch going all the way up. And again, just take your time when doing this. And the hardest part is when you get to the last like 4 3 or 4 horizontal bars. And so once you get those all up, we're going to do the same thing. Once you only have one loop left on your crochet hook, put the loop onto the 2 pegs and then make sure you hold down that loop as you crank forward so the needle doesn't pop that loop off the small pegs. And then I'm going to fix another drop stitch, but there you go. There's how you can fix tuck stitches and drop stitches on your machine. Now, again, if you are a beginner with the Sentro circular knitting machine, drop stitches and tuck stitches can be common, and that's usually a tension issue when you're beginning, especially if you're only using like a DK number 3 weighted yarn. That works great in these machines, so it's probably not too thick. It's just that you need to work on the tension, and I'm going to link in the description below some other videos that I made on drop stitches and how to reduce them as well. So I hope you found this video helpful. Hit that like and follow button for more free tutorials and helpful tricks on using your Sentro circular knitting machine. And thank you so much for all the likes, all the follows, and all your kind and wonderful comments. I appreciate them so much, and happy crafting, everybody.